We are in Phoenix, and we have a wonderful group here for the launch of the book, The Golden Lake. Thank you. I'm embarrassed to say the first book I've done in 20 years, and those 20 years have gone by like this. So I just want to talk a little bit about the book and how it came about, so that you kind of have some background. Many of you know about the Galactic heritage cards, which there's a lot of videos on YouTube about that. This is the Japanese version, but these are the cards I channeled in 2011-ish time period that work with Galactic heritage. And to be honest, when I channeled this deck, I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't know how to make a card deck, and I didn't know if what was wanting to be transmitted to me was even going to make sense. And it was a huge trust on my end to do it blind, kind of. And I could only work 2 hours a day, because then I would get a massive headache if I tried to do it faster than that, because of the amount of energy. So now it's, how many, 7, 8 years later that these cards have been out, and I feel that the lessons have been continuing for me in learning the depth of these cards. And I feel like I even only know the tip of the iceberg right now, and I keep learning more and more. So one of the things I began to learn from the cards was that our galactic family, especially the species we all know, the primary ones, Pleiades, Zeta, Sirius, etc., that they had their own evolutionary paths, and they had their own issues and healing process to go through. And each of their paths was unique. It started to reveal itself in the cards. So, for example, if you look at, I'm sorry if you're not familiar with the cards, I'll try to just be as simple as possible. But if you look at, there's a Pleiadian card called Guilt. It's just an example. And that card is representing one of that species' deepest wounds. Each of the species has a signature wound, let's say. So the cards take you through their evolutionary process through time in 3 eras. First era is the child species, and that's the era of where the wound begins. The second era is as they enter adulthood, the species, and they go through their different processes of healing. And then the third era is the era of their awakening and their complete healing. And all of this is part of a holographic matrix that we all are part of, so we tap into it. So as I started to learn about these different wounds of these different species, it just all started to make sense. And I felt like when I channeled that information for the cards, that it was the beginning of like a new phase of my work. After that, the channeling that I was doing, to me, seemed that it had deepened. And I was bringing through a lot more information about these ancient civilizations that we are all part of, and how their wounds and their healing teaches us now on Earth how to navigate our own issues and healing process. So the book, Golden Lake, is a collection of some of the deepest channelings that I've done that explore some of these wounds. But it's not a dark, depressing book in that way. It's more that here's what your forefathers experienced, here's what you're experiencing, how can you navigate through this? Because right now, this time period on Earth, as you all know, is pretty crazy, to say the least. And sometimes we feel like we just don't know how to navigate it. So the book is also a roadmap, kind of, a navigational roadmap to help us work through, as a species wounds, individual wounds, wounds of the collective of our star family, holographically, simultaneously. That's a tall order, but I think that it's really helped me, the information I've channeled. Back when I started channeling in the 80s, and then when I wrote Prism of Lyra, which was the first book, my motivation was to answer my own questions, basically. And to answer my own questions that were deeply, deeply sitting there and not being resolved. So that is still to this day my deepest motivation, is to find out why we are the way we are, where we're going, how we can facilitate the process. So when we're talking about the Golden Lake book then, a lot of the material was first channeled in Japan. I think many of you know that a lot of my work, most of my work is done in Japan. So and there's not like a preferential reason for that. It's just the way the universe has kind of set it up for me. And I think I have, a very strong connection with my groups in Japan, and it's probably a karmic thing or an old ancient connection. And for some reason, they are a catalyst to bring out a lot of this information. So you find then information in here about the very beginnings of creation, but in a different perspective from Prism of Lyra, and two viewpoints primarily. One is a Pleiadian viewpoint, and it represents, you might call, maybe more feminine type teaching, feminine energy, not speaking of gender. And that was the style of our ancient Pleiadians when they came on the planet and assisted us. And then there is, let's say, a counter, not a counter, I don't want to say an opposite, but another perspective, let's say, of our Sirian forefathers, who also were working with the Pleiadians in ancient days, assisting with the new humans. And their style is a little bit more masculine in that it tends to use the mental body a little bit more than the Pleiadians do. And together, they created a school that they called the School of the Nine Serpents, which you can read about in the book. It's detailed in there, which was basically a navigational roadmap for awakening that was given to the ancients, and it originally came from a very, very, very ancient Vega. So it's a really ancient system that's been adapted for different planets in our galactic family. So you're going to find when you go through this book that there is a lot of information about that ancient time, about the School of the Nine Serpents. There's a lot of different tools, exercises, things like that in the book as well that you can use for yourself. And I hope that, well, I know there's actually only a few people in here who have read it because it's only been out a week. So it's my local people that wrestled the copies from me, read it, and you guys are the only like objective perspective that I have, that I know, because I'm still in it. I'm so in it that I can't see it objectively. So what I've said, does that cover it? Yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but I think, what was your experience when you read it?
Buckle your seats.
Okay.
It's a game changer, guys. Big game changer.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Not that I knew they were going to say that. It's not like the promotional commercial in the back there. But I think everyone will get out of it maybe what they need. Let's put it that way. And I suspect it's very layered. So if you read it and then read it next year or in 5 years, that it might be like reading a very new book again. So it just needed to be born finally after 20 years. The next book finally got born, and I hope it's not going to be another 20 years until the next one, but I suspect not. Okay, so thank you all for coming tonight, and it's a great honor to have you here. This event happened because my local team made it happen, and I want to thank you guys very, very much, because this event was created with love, because given my own devices I never would have done this, because I tend to like to hide in a corner, and so they kind of had to force me out of the corner a little bit. So please thank my team for this wonderful event. What we'll do is we will do a channeling. I kind of have an idea a little bit about what we're going to do, but not fully. I don't always get the full program, and I'm not actually sure who's going to come through, because I'm feeling 2 different beings, and they're probably going to duke it out, and we'll see who's coming. But I will describe to you, well, first of all, I do want to give a shout out to you guys that there's a big, I'm saying for the Facebook group here, there's a big group of people here who are actually on their way to the Bashar event in Sedona. So if any of you guys watching are also going to be at the Bashar event in Sedona this weekend, we have counterparts here that are joining as well. So yeah, the energy definitely connects. Thank you for coming. And thank you all, especially new people that I don't know, for coming and sharing this night with me. It's really special for me. It's a little bit surreal. I'm kind of in a coma a little bit, but I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with my channeling, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Is there anybody that just wandered in off the street and you don't know what I do? Oh yeah, we have.
I signed her up.
Oh, okay. Okay, we have 2 from Indiana here who just, yeah, first timers.
So I flew in off the street.
Flew in off the street, okay. So basically I do channeling, and I call it trance channeling. I do go into a trance state for this, to access this information. So you're going to see my eyes will be closed, but if I walk around when I'm channeling, they do use my eyes just a little bit to navigate. I like to joke that I'm more graceful when I'm channeling than when I'm not. So that's very helpful. And I think the 2 beings I'm sensing for tonight is, one is Sasha, who many of you are familiar with if you know my work, and that is the Pleiadian that I've been channeling since 1988. And she has provided, I would say, probably 75% of the material in this book. And then the other is, I don't think he's ever channeled anywhere publicly in America, actually, except for the contact retreat last year. But it's a being named Hamón, who's a Sirian ambassador. He has channeled here? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I did not know that. So Hamón has a lot of information in this book as well, because he has said that the Sirians are very close to us in evolutionary connection, let's say. They've been with us through the very beginning, but also their evolutionary path has been very similar to what we're going through. And I've felt since probably about 2011 that their communications have been stronger, because now we've really entered a kind of a crucial phase in our evolution. So that's one of the reasons why he has come. And for those of you familiar with my channeling but have not seen Hamón, you'll see the mannerisms are very different. He's more masculine, I guess. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what he does tonight. He can be a little bit unexpected, and I'm still getting used to him. He channels a lot in Japan, but not so much here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, and they will monitor my energy, and depending upon whether they feel I need a break, we might have a short break so that I can get grounded and then go back into the channeling. But there will be time for Q&A as well. So if a question happens, I'm already starting to fade, I can feel. If a question arises for you to ask, if you just raise your hand, somebody will bring you the microphone, and that way everybody can hear your question, please. Providing that the device that Anne is so lovingly charging over there. All right, so are we ready?
Yes.
All right. I know you're probably like, shut up, Lisa, get to the channeling. So for those of you on Facebook, you're going to see the very beginning of the session, and then we will say goodbye, and then we will have the privacy here for the group. Okay.
We can't see you if we put the light on.
Did the light?
It's not great.
It's not great. Is there a way to do just this side of the room? No? No?
Very shaded.
I think maybe you guys, the Facebook guys, would prefer that they can hear me, and seeing me is not as important. So you guys are more comfortable with the lights off?
Yeah.
Me too. All right. All right, here we go. I'll see you guys later. No. Sorry, I got to turn the recorder on.
Oh gosh.
I know.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It's my responsibility. Yeah, when I start to go into this state, I don't know what end is up. Oops. Okay, now we're ready. Hello, my friends. It is I, Hamón. We are so very honored by your presence tonight. We could not resist sharing because there is so much to share. And since you have passed through what you call the 2012 gateway, now what we can share increases. Because the energy field on your world is such that you are careening down the path toward integration. Doesn't that sound lovely? Yes. This means then that the old is falling away and the new is coming in. However, our message tonight is twofold. There are two things specifically we wish to share with you, and then we would love to dialogue with all of you. First, a little bit of mechanics, let's say. Many of you who are familiar with our work, Sasha's work, Lyssa's work, etc., you know that what is often talked about is the idea of the one consciousness that you are fragmenting into the illusion of separation, and then the experience of this separated reality all the way down to the most deepest polarity. This is often the theme we talk about because it is so very necessary to understand the dynamics of this. Why? All right, we have tools here to share with you to make our point a little bit more clearly. When we talk deep metaphysics, it's necessary to use metaphor, because metaphor is the way to convey very deep ideas that language, especially your linear language, cannot. So we have here then an eye. Blue was the only color the internet had. It could be any color. And this eye is representing the one consciousness in creation, all that is, in its full integrated state. And in that full integrated state, there is no polarity, there's no duality, there is simply consciousness at rest. And as we have said many times, when consciousness is at rest in that way, it is still. For there is no dynamic tension to move energy, to create conflict. It is simply just stillness. Perhaps you can say, like a golden lake, yes? That's a Pleiadian, we borrowed a little Pleiadian terminology there. Now, let's say that there's a stirring in the lake. And the lake, again, we speak metaphorically, but the lake wishes to experience itself in a different way. It wishes to experience the ability to see itself from outside of itself. It wishes to experience even forgetting this state of oneness and instead moving into a separated state so that it can learn about how to see itself. Sounds a bit like a paradox. So, the process then of the first process of duality began. Full state of the one and the separated state within the one, the temporary illusion of separation, where the physical universe is and where the incarnation is of individual souls. All right, so you go through then this separation. We have here the one, and then you have the creation of the section inside that does not know itself. This is a piece of paper that has two holes in it. Imagine the one looks through these two holes of duality. What does it see? If you are an eye looking through two holes, metaphorically, then you have two eyes. Two eyes representing duality. I just want to define duality for a moment. And the very most simple example is that of the battery that runs the camera. One end is positive, one end has a positive charge, one end has a negative charge. It doesn't mean one end is bad and one end is good. It simply means two opposite charges, and the two opposite charges are what create the movement that creates the energy to run your device. So the same is true with your reality. Polarity is the fuel, if you will, so that you can have this experience of separation. So fundamentally then, it is a useful and helpful idea that has a purpose. Polarity has a purpose until it doesn't. That's kind of a joke. Meaning that polarity can have a purpose until you start believing the stories of polarity itself. What do we mean by that? Humans fundamentally, through their evolutionary process, as they have moved deeper and deeper into separation and forgetfulness, start to believe that their experience of polarity is real, is the truth. So there's mythology, for instance, that's being created, like evil is here and good is here. I prefer the good, I hate the evil. And this idea of polarity gets generated and generated and seeded until the only way reality is viewed is through the two polarized eyes. How do you get out of that trap? Well, eventually, you have to go back the way you came. Meaning, remembering that you are more than a polarized reality. Remembering that there is a one eye behind this lens of separation. That's what we mean by going back the way you came. Remembering first and foremost. This leads us to then, though, the trap of polarity. Please know I speak of this from the knowledge of my civilization too, because we have had to walk this road as well. It's a challenging road, it's a painful road. However, it is a fulfilling road as you make the journey. But what is the biggest pitfall? This is something we spoke to a few of you about a few weeks ago. The idea of a virus. Again, we're using metaphor. Polarity can become like a virus if you do not develop the ability to go backwards through the process of bringing your attention back and remembering the one consciousness that you are. Sorry, are we interfering with the...
I think too much quantum. It's taking all the polarity out, so this is the charge.
You know that microphone does not work in situations like this, so do not be surprised. All right, going back to what we were saying. when a civilization is in their deepest part of separation and polarity, when they have forgotten who they are, that polarized vision can spread like a virus. This is where you are finding yourselves now in many arenas on your world, and you only have to look at your internet, for example, where you see the fighting, yes, the negative, the positive, fighting each other, each person thinking their truth is the right one, when in reality they are simply two different eyes in opposition to each other, or reflections of each other. So we encourage you to begin a very deliberate process of beginning to separate mind from consciousness itself. Consciousness is the one eye. The mind is the interpreter of a polarized reality, and very often the chief interpreter among them is the human ego, which we heard a few groans out there in the audience. We do have to say the ego in its fundamental job is not a negative thing. It is meant to be a conduit, let's say, an information processor between the separated reality and the one reality. However, when you go deep into separation, it forgets its job is supposed to be neutral. And it then begins to latch on to whatever belief or story it has come to believe is true, forgetting everything is illusion. So what we are encouraging for you as a practice, especially in the coming years, is to recognize the idea of polarized thought spreading until you take the steps backwards, if you will, back toward the one. How do you do that? Most of it has to do with simply developing yourself through meditation and through self-observation. Developing yourself in such a way as that you know yourself. You know your patterns. You know your habits. You know your pains. Because your pains inform your habits. Pain is always the root of the beliefs and the habits, etc. So know thyself, as you have heard that many times. Knowing thyself will provide the road for you to be able to go back the way you came, so to speak, from the one. Now, if you have to keep doing that, it is your choice, but it is okay if you want to shut it off.
What do you think? Is that for Ron or Lisa?
Keep it going.
Okay. They prefer I keep
We'll keep the polarization game going.
All right. We've got a very lovely person giving that the charge, yes? All right. So, the point is, we could give a very, very nerdy lecture. We don't want to do that. You can read some of it in the book. Simply, this is the time now to know yourself well and to not be ashamed of whatever pain there is that keeps you stuck in a certain place, because every person has that. My people had it at the same level that you are at now. It is part of the process, and it is okay. Also, that idea of loving yourself Also the idea of loving yourself, even when you feel you hate yourself for having these things, is part of the process. But as you move backwards, 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 toward the one eye, then the love becomes much stronger than anything else. All right, we've belabored that point. We're going to move on because there's one more thing we want to talk about, and if you want to talk about this issue later, certainly we can do so. It's going to seem like we are taking a tangent, but we're not. We're going to bring it around to connect. All right, let's turn it off, please. Thank you for your service. Goodbye. All right, the next thing. Hot button topic right now on your world. Can everyone hear?
Yes.
All right. It is the phrase or the term you've called disclosure. Oh, yes. It is a hot button topic. We do want to talk about it, but perhaps, maybe what we have to say might be a little bit surprising. What we'd like to say about this is coming from the perspective we have, which is kind of the bird's eye view. On your world, so many of you are longing for disclosure. When is it going to happen? When are we going to know the truth? But as we have just talked about the tendency of humanity, especially at this point in your evolution, we can say with surety, if disclosure happened today, it would be very distorted. And we don't think you want that. Yes, it might be nice to finally have this, what you call, validation, where some authority figure in your world comes out and says, yes, extraterrestrials are real. But you look around your world now at the authority figures, who would you trust? Yes? Because there's always going to be an opposite. When a civilization is in that depth of polarity and on the verge of shifting polarity, which you are, even though it doesn't seem that way, it's a volatile time where you cannot look outward for the validation of your reality. So from our point of view as extraterrestrials, while we would so love to be able to land in your baseball diamond and come out and shake your hands, we know in this environment now, it is not the right time. And we do feel you know that in your hearts of hearts too. So, what's the next step? Instead, we're so excited about this, what we are about to say, and we don't feel yet that you know the power of this, or that you trust the power of this. 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago at this point, some of you, Lyssa especially, with even a few of you in the room here, began contact work. There were maybe very few people on your planet doing this, but you went out every weekend or every other weekend and you did the work and you built the foundation. And now, 30 years later, thousands and thousands and thousands of people around your world are now doing this work. It has grown exponentially. And these teams all around your world are having contact. Now, yes, some teams might be focused just on the flashing lights in the sky, yes? They might be thinking that that's what contact is. Oh, look, he signaled back at me. But most of you who have done this work a lot know there's much more to that. For that is not contact per se. It is the preliminary idea of contact, but there's a lot going on the ground, so to speak, within the veils that you are not yet seeing. So all of you who are doing this kind of work, whether it is in groups, whether it is in the privacy of your own living room, you are changing the contact fabric of your planet. You are making it easier for us to communicate. You are making it easier, most importantly, for the awareness of contact to shift in such a way that the idea of disclosure becomes an idea that is almost antiquated. Because you know, most of you know, and a great many of you know out in the world, that this is real. So if we are to look at the timeline well into the future of your Earth from this moment, and we are to look at this particular timeline and how disclosure happened in this trajectory, in this moment, we see that those of you doing the work, those of you actually beginning the contact processes on your own, have built the grassroots foundation that has made an announcement from a authority figure, something that is anticlimactic. In the timeline you are in right now, which of course can change, but in this timeline you are in right now, disclosure did happen. Somebody made an announcement. Do you know what the reaction was? Ho-hum, we already know. And then everyone goes back to their life. Granted, you have the extremes. So you have some ends that got very, very scared and all of that, but for the most part, it was a non-event because of the ground you are all building now. Our understanding of opening contact on a world such as yours is that this method is the most, if you call it healthy, or the most balanced, and is the least likely to create xenophobia and or religions, worshiping, like in the ancient days. It happening in a more organic way as it is right now is very, very healthy. That having been said, we do want to say the next decade, you will see an uptick in the intensity of contact itself. What does intensity mean? Well, we'll leave that to you to figure out. Intensity is different for everyone. But let's say more real, more experientially real, more moving, more deep. Because ultimately, as we have said many times, when you go back the way you came, back to the one, there is no one out there that is separate from you. So this journey then of contact is actually also a journey back to yourself. Yes. All right, to the Facebook audience we say thank you very much and good night.